They're very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, you know, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something, you know.
Get that crowd warmed up. There's Mr. Yahola Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of the War Cry Podcast. I am your host, Yahola Tiger, on this brisk October evening. The guest I have for you guys tonight, I'm really excited about this. He's got a lot of information. He does a lot of research into the Bigfoot phenomenon and the UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, whatever your slice of pie on that is. But before we get to Mr. Ghostlee Hunter, it's spooky season, guys. So this month, I am working diligently, reaching out to people, getting people on the podcast to spook y'all out with some crazy stories and some spooky stories, scary stories, horror stories, whatever you want to call them. And tonight, like I said, we got Hunters of the Paranormal. And then on Monday, if it's Monday, I think, Monday or Tuesday, I have to recheck. After Walker Paranormal, a paranormal group out of Chakota, Oklahoma, will be joining me. And then after that, I'm bringing back a favorite. Everyone, you guys told me that you liked, you know, what he had going on, and he wanted to hear some more stories. I'll be having Mr. Patrick Meekin on, the author of Nightmare in Holmes County, and a couple other books. I'm escaping my mind right now, Patrick. Sorry if you're hearing this. But I'll be having Mr. Patrick Meekin on again. Rod from Lodge Tales, I'm going to be having him on again. We got to figure out a time. You know, I'll be trying to get him. But the month of October, Halloween is my favorite holiday. People say Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve. No, it's spooky season, y'all. And, you know, without further ado, I would like for you guys to give a small round of applause to Mr. Ghostlee Hunter from the Hunters of the Paranormal podcast. How's it going, man? You doing all right?
Howdy. Howdy, War Cry family. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous here, but I'm doing very well. Sorry, I can stumble through. I'm sorry, I stumble through things sometimes. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm excited to have you on. You know, there's no need to be nervous. We're gonna just talk and, you know, let it rip, man. Because like that's one thing that in the intro, you know, I always say it's very, very dangerous, and I like that. I like it when it's a little spicy. But
awesome.
For those people who don't know, you know, maybe what your channel is or what your podcast is, give them a little background on what you got going on over there.
Well, we've got it's a little podcast called Hunters of the Paranormal, and my co-host just passed away here a few weeks back. His name is David from Texas, and I actually got to meet him. I'm in Indiana, so we actually got to travel to Texas, and I got to meet him just a week before he passed away. So that was a blessing that I got to meet him. And I've been dealing with that, and I've just recently started doing our shows again, and I've got a new co-host and everything. But my friend David, I'm going to miss him. He was like a brother for me, and he had a big heart, and he was awesome. I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss him.
Rest in peace, man. I didn't know that. That's tough, man. That's really tough, and I'm glad you're keeping going though. You know, I'm sure he probably would want you to do that.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely going to keep on going. We say truth seekers mount up on the show, and we just kind of consider ourselves truth seekers. You know, we're just looking for the truth, and you know, nobody really has the total answers to everything, but we can sure try to figure it out or try to find them the best we can.
For sure, yeah. And you know, that's one thing about my show that I'm glad that you and I have been kind of going back and forth for months now. Yes. I was supposed to have you on back in I think maybe in the middle of the summer, basically, I think. And, you know, things happen, but I'm glad that I can have you on. I'm glad that, you know, we can, you know, finally connect and things like that. And for those, like I said, yeah, for sure. And for those, like I said, unfamiliar and maybe haven't heard any backstory, what got you on this path?
Well, as a young kid, I always liked, I liked paranormal, Star Wars, and I'm 52 years old, so I remember the In Search Of shows. I got to see Leonard Nimoy, and they would have shows on there, Bigfoot and stuff like that. So I was always fascinated with it. But I lived up in northern part of Indiana, where it's just like a lot of cornfields up there. So when I say there's Bigfoot down here, people, or in Indiana, people, if they associate what I'm getting ready to tell you with up north, that's not correct, because I'm down in the big timber along the big rivers and the between the big rivers, and there's a bunch of cave systems that's in here. And well, I'll tell you what got me into it was it would have been in November of 1994. I had moved down here with my cousins to go to college, and I just absolutely loved to deer hunt. And during October of that year, I had gotten my first deer with a bow, and we was excited and everything. And we hunted this little farm. It was an old guy that he would go down to Florida for the winter. So a buddy of ours, he kind of watched over the farm. So we got permission to go in there, as long as you don't tear nothing up. So basically we was all going in there to hunt, but we were watching out for the place too at the same time. And so me and my cousins, back then I didn't have a tree stand. And I do now. I hunt out of tree stands, and I didn't have a climber or anything, but I hunted down on the ground. And it was opening day. It was opening day of gun season. And when we left the house, we left an hour early because we wanted to get there before daylight, because we figured they would run the other hunters would run the deer into us, in the little area where we was at. And so prior to this, we had went in there and scouted and everything, and my cousins were going to hunt on the outside edge of the field, overlooking the fields, to maybe get some shots at deer running by on the field. Well, I went inside the woods about good 100, 200 yards, but I went back in the back of this little woods, and it connected up to this great big section of woods, like a deep section of woods. But in this area that I picked out, I was standing up on a ridge top, and I was overlooking an area that looked like a bowl, like like a depression in the ground, a bowl. And there was 4 ridge tops that come in there, and I was standing on one of them, but there was one to my left, there was one to my right, and one straight across from me. But if anything come in there, they would come in within 30 yards, and I'd have a perfect shot, perfect broadside shot. If they come down any of the 4 ravines, I'd have a shot at them. So that morning, when we left the house, it was real foggy, and down here where I'm at, the fog is really, really bad. Like, it's like driving in a bowl of milk when you're trying to drive through this stuff. It's like you got to go real slow and turn your brights off and try to make your way down the road. Well, this was one of those particular mornings when it was just super, super foggy, and it was overcast as well. I remember that. And when it's overcast and foggy, it's not only dark, it's dark. Like, you can't see your hand in front of your face or nothing. And so I decided, when I went in the woods, I was young and dumb and stupid, and I probably shouldn't have done this, but I decided I wasn't going to use a flashlight going in the back in that woods. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. So I'm in the dark, and I'm feeling my way back there, and I get about halfway back, and I hear something. And so I flashed the light on, and I just kept it down, pointed at the ground, and flashed the light on, thinking maybe it's a hunter that, I didn't want to get shot. So I flipped it on. I know it's stupid, but I flipped the light on, and it lit everything up around me. And I could see a doe and a little one standing up on a little rise to my left. And so I shut that flashlight off real quick, and I thought, man, I've already spooked them out of here, because that kind of took off when they seen me. So I thought, man, I've already bloated. I've run them out of here, but I'm just going to keep on going, because I want to hunt, So I get back there. I get all the way back to the back, find my spot, still in the dark. And in this particular spot that I found, there were 4 trees coming up and out of the ground, and you could get kind of in the middle of these 4 trees, and you had like a little natural blind there. So I get in there. I was using an old 20 gauge Remington pump shotgun with a slug barrel on it, and I leaned it up against the tree, and I'm standing there in the dark, and when you're standing in the dark, I mean, time, time, you don't know really what the time is, because it could be a minute or two or whatever. But it seemed like I was there for maybe 10 minutes at the most. And off to my right, where this ridge is to my right, is where the deepest part of the woods is, and I hear movement coming. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is going to be good because the hunters must be moving in here, and they're trying to run a deer in here, or they're going to run the deer in here to me, And so this thing comes down the hill, and it gets right past me. It gets just right past me at probably, I don't know, if you're looking at the clock, it'd probably be at about the 11 o'clock position, just past me. And it's standing there, and it got real quiet. And so I'm looking down in the dark. You can't see it at this point in time. You can't see a silhouette, nothing. You can just hear it walking down in there. So it's no more than 20 yards. It may have even been a little closer than that to me. And so I'm looking down in there, and then all of a sudden, these eyes just appeared in the dark, and they was glowing, and they were like an amber color, like an amber yellow color, and they had these black slits in them. And when I first saw it, my first thought was, are you really seeing this? And my best way to describe it to you is they were about the size of a like a tennis ball maybe, and they were I don't know, they was probably 6-8 inches apart, and they were probably up. I'm guessing they was probably up off the ground about 8 feet.
Man.
And so it's looking right up. It looks right up at me. And I'm thinking to myself, am I really seeing this? Am I really seeing this? Like it's not computing. And I'm thinking the only thing I can think of that looked like it was Felix the cat. You remember those old clocks? That's the Felix the cat with the eyes that move back and forth. Well, that's what it looked like, but a yellow, like ambery color to it. And so I'm sitting there looking down at it. And then while I'm looking at it, all of a sudden, it's not like, I don't know, they call it mind speak or whatever. I don't know. Maybe mine's playing tricks on me or whatever. But at first I thought, well, that somebody's coming here with coal miner lights on, and they're messing with me, trying to run me out of here, But the thing about the eye shine, it wasn't eye shine. It was like bioluminescence, I guess you could call it. So it was lit up. You know what I'm saying? It didn't light anything up around it. That was the weird thing about it.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't light anything up around it, but it was lit up itself, if that makes sense. And so I'm sitting there looking at it, and then I get this message, and it says, I just wanted you to know that I was here. And then it either closed its eyes or turned its head and looked the other direction. And then it started walking off, and it just walked, and it went straight up the hill to my left. And then I could hear it going on out into the field. And something that I've always found odd about this whole thing is, and I know people ain't going to believe this, but this is the God's honest truth. I didn't run. I didn't get scared. I was so bewildered and thinking, what in the world did I just see? I just stayed right there, and I hunted. I hunted the whole time, but I never told anybody that story ever. And never, especially my cousins that were with me, they were on the outside, and I never told them word one of that story. So, that happened. And then I had a friend, he was a Vietnam vet, and I hung out with him for a while. And he was my neighbor, and he'd come down and we'd talk and this and that and stuff. And this one time we got to talking about Bigfoot one time, and he was telling me where the river is here where I live. He said a buddy of his, he said it would have been in the 70s. He said his buddy was running commercial nets in the river. You know how they got those big hoop nets that they catch fish in, and they have to, like they anchor them down in the ground, tie them off to the bank, and then they harvest the fish or whatever. Yeah. Well, he went to check his net, and he got up under a tree, and he was pulling his net up, and this is what he said: a baby Bigfoot jumped in the boat and just about beat him to death, and he shot that thing and killed it. And he shot it and killed it. He took it to the boat ramp. And he called the game wardens, because he said that thing just about beat him to death. And he called the game wardens, and he just about went to prison over that whole ordeal. They made him shut up and the whole 9 yards.
Man.
So that go ahead.
A second. I'm processing that. And what year would that have been?
It would have been in the 70s. And I think I remember him saying it was like 78, 77, 78 or something like that.
Wow. And so he's a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, and it wasn't him; it was a buddy of his that
okay.
that went down there.
Man,
But it was
that
somebody
is
that he knew very, very well that wouldn't just make up a story like that. So what I'm getting at, I'm telling you that other people down here have seen him as well. So
man. No, I 100% because especially it's a different people. A lot of people don't really realize that today is not the 70s. That's why I wanted to know like the time frame of when because
right,
because like they're not seeing things like that anymore hardly. You don't
hardly
hear those
right.
types of stories and there's not a lot of people who are just going out. I think it's maybe, the convenience of having a Walmart, half a mile down the road or, within a couple
Mm-hmm.
miles.
Well, they've
But
encroached on a lot of wildlife and a lot of wildlife areas. They've cut a lot of them down. And just in the short time that I've been alive, I mean, I'm 52. I remember this like the late 70s, early 80s, and everything was so much more wild than it is now. And when I say wild, I mean there was more trees back then. There wasn't like subdivisions that they put in or nothing like that. There was a lot more wilderness at that time. But we've since lost that, and they're pushing them, whatever these things are, they're pushing them into like areas where I'm at now, where there's thousands of acres of forest that nobody ever goes in. You know what I mean?
yeah. And so to kind of get back, so you heard that story and he told you
Yes.
that story.
Mm-hmm.
What other things did he tell you about during
He
that time
told
frame?
me he lived down in an area down around it'd be Vincennes area, but it's called Decker Chapel is the name of the place. And that's the most information that I'm going to say about where I'm at. But anyway, he told me that when he was a kid, his dad they would go to town, and there was an old man that would come into town, and his dad kind of was friends with this old man. And his dad told him, he said, Bud, he said, if that old man tells you something, he said, you can believe it because he's not a man of many words. And he don't just like to talk to anybody, if that makes sense to you. And so he told me he got to talking to that old man one time, and he said he was telling him he was down on the river and he was fishing, and it was getting to be evening time. And he said he watched a Bigfoot come down the bank and start noodling for catfish, reaching up underneath the riverbanks, trying to catch catfish. So yeah, that was another one that I had heard.
Man, so he was out. He's out in the middle of nowhere. He's just seeing all types of animals. Did he mention anything else other than Bigfoot being out there?
No, pretty much that was about the gist of that. He didn't nothing else that I know of. That was the only story he ever told me about that. But there was another time and that we went on the river where I told you that thing had jumped in the boat and the Bigfoot baby. He said it was a baby Bigfoot. I who knows what it was, but I couldn't see somebody making up a story like that. Because Bud knew him and saw how shook up he was when it happened. So it happened when Bud was around. So Bud knew what was going on. But anyway, me and Bud, we get in a boat and we head down the river, and that's around the time he was telling me some of those stories. And there was this place where along the river that we would go to, and there was a rock wall, and we'd have to take we go down the main river, and then we'd have to take a little like a creek that flowed into it. We'd take the boat up into that probably about 100 yards or so, and then we get out, and then we go up in the big timber there, and there was a bluff up in there, and where this bluff was, it had writing on the wall there from 1790s. So like people that would come down the river, they would stop there, and then they'd make camp, and then they'd etch their names on the wall and this and that. And it's really a really neat place to see. But what had happened there was there's a lot of limestone down in this area, and there was a great big, I'm telling you, this was it looked like a big boulder, but it's the size of a house, if you can imagine that. And this thing broke off of that rock wall, and it hit the ground, and it created a cave underneath this rock. And so he took me up in there and showed me all that. And so when he was in Vietnam, he was a sniper. So he was good at sneaking in places and sneaking out quiet, And so we go in there, we sneak in there, and I go in and look at the cave, and I thought, well, I'll just go back in there and check it out, So I walked in and looked at it, and then I come back to where he was at, because he was staying along the edge of the riverbank, and I see him, and he is intently looking like he can hear something or see something going on. And I walk up there and I kind of whispered to him. I said, what's going on, bud? And he threw his hand out like, be quiet. like be quiet. And so we're standing there and we're watching across the river, and here comes 6 or 7 deer running right down along the edge of the river, and coming right behind them. It stayed in the woods. I don't know how far it was back up in the woods, but it was back along where they was at. You could catch a glimpse of them running between the trees, just one right after another. And here come this thing, and it's knocking trees over, coming right behind them. And them deer turn and they head right into the woods, and right straight across from us. But man, whatever that thing was, we was watching the trees fall down right behind whatever they were. Chasing those things. I don't, it could have been a Bigfoot. I think it probably was, because the area where that was at, it was about 3,000 or 4,000 acres of woods, and it takes a good to drive back in there. It would take you probably about 20 minutes to get back into there along the river, and there's no houses or anything in there. But I'd have no idea what that was.
Man, I mean, and that's one thing, especially with him. I always have a lot of respect for Vietnam veterans, and like for people. That's one thing about his stories, specifically, is that to survive Vietnam, you got to be a bad man. Like you got to be somebody who can survive. And and so one thing that's very interesting to me, did he I guess teach you any, like you said, sneaking up on things? And
he taught me a lot of. He was like a mentor to me. He taught me a lot of things. Oh yeah, my dad was in Vietnam too, and my dad. Like I was telling you before the show, that my dad's got some Native American in him, and you know how like in the fall when you're deer hunting, the woods it seems like it's almost a foot thick with leaves that are crunchy.
Mm-hmm.
And a little squirrel or a chipmunk, they can't even move without making a noise. So me and my dad was hunting one morning, and he off to my right is where he was hunting, and he was probably hunting a good, 100 yards away from me. And he had to come all the way across those leaves to get up to me. And I should have heard him coming. And I looked over in that direction, didn't see him. And I closed my eyes and I looked down at the ground, and just for a split second, and I heard something, and he stepped his foot down, and he was standing right in front of me. He never made one sound.
Man,
never made one sound. Those guys are tough, man.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I was like, oh, he's a Vietnam veteran, and he's out here, just kind of being, silent but deadly in these, these Indiana woods. I just thought that's really cool. And it sounds like you had a pretty interesting childhood. And as you got older, did you see anything, or is there anything that that continued on that journey of getting weird stuff in your life?
Oh yeah. In 2016, I'll go back to the 1994 deal, where this area where I had this encounter with these eyes. For years, this was back before the internet, because 1994, for years, from like 1994 up to like 2003, 2004, we would see these lights in the sky over in that area, over where I had that encounter with whatever that was. And these lights, the best way I can explain it to you would be like, there's some pictures on like YouTube that show them videos of them or whatever, but they're like these orange balls of light. They look like I don't know, you could say they're just round, and they kind of look like a mini sun, if you could imagine that. But what these weird lights would do is they would pop on, and again, I was up with Bud one time, and we were watching them, and these things popped on, and they made like a big triangle shape. But then one would disappear, and then it'd reappear to the left, and then the one to the left would disappear, and then it'd go to the right, and then one of them would start heading over towards another one, and they would merge together, and then one would pop out of another one, and this went on for probably 10-15 minutes. And so he lived up on a big hill, like he said the geologist told him it was a glacial dome is what it was, where the glaciers had come through and they had pushed the ground up, and it was up real high. So we could see all, over the top of the horizon above the tree line, so we're looking out there and we're watching this. We got like a bird's eye view of this thing going on. And so I had seen him for years. And so he's standing out there and I said, hey, bud, I said, is that military flares? Because I'm always thinking, there's military, there's always military around, and we got military base to the south of us and we had one to the northeast of us. And I thought, maybe it's, the illumination flares or those flares that they shoot out to, throw off a missile or whatever. So, and I thought maybe because it's so rural out there, I figured maybe they was testing it. And so we're sitting there watching it. And I knew that he knew about it because he was in Vietnam. And I said, is that military flares? And he said, no. He said, that ain't military flares. He said, military flares don't go up. They go down. So, and he was a pilot too. He had his own plane and everything. And, he got to see him. And there was another time, I'll tell you this, that area where I had that thing with the encounter with the eyes, there was a buddy of my cousin's that he owned a farm right there, just like right across from where that happened. And he had a great big section of woods and everything. And I remember we would go coon hunting with him at night sometimes. And this one night we went and we pulled in before we got to the spot where we was going. We pulled into his farm. He had to get something or somebody had to get something. So we had a couple other guys with us, which was his buddies. And he said, he got out of the car and his buddy said, hey, just out of the clear blue, he said, do you remember that time that we pulled in here and that UFO was hovering right here over the silo? And he said, I got so scared that I jumped out and I started cussing at it. And so I sit there and I listened to that conversation, but it wasn't like they, was advertising it to everybody. It was just between them. And so that's some UFO activity around that area where I had that encounter. And my cousins used to make fun of me because I looked at the paranormal stuff and all that. And they went fishing one time and they come home and they were scared to death. And my cousin told me, he said, tell him what we saw today. And the other cousin said, no, don't tell him. You'll get him started. And so finally I got it out of the one cousin. I said, well, what did you see today? And he said, well, that place that we like to go fishing, there was a specific strip mine pit we used to go to that we like to go fishing. They went to pull up at the four-way stop, which was a gravel road out in the middle of nowhere. And when they pulled up to that four-way stop, a silver disc come in and hovered right over top of them and then shot off. So they seen it. So they become believers that day. They didn't make fun of me after that.
And it's always like family too. That's one thing that I'm lucky enough to have a family that has seen a lot of weird stuff. And it's to me, one thing about like people that have eyewitness type of encounters and then, basically just encounters with anything, they're always afraid to kind of tell people and they're afraid to tell their own family, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, you start telling people and then they think you're nuts, and you're crazy. But I'm not here to convince anybody that it's real. I don't have to convince anybody because I know that it's real. Whatever this phenomenon is, there's something going on out there. So, that time I was telling you about going coon hunting, that night that we went out, we parked along the road and it was like one of those nights where it was like crystal clear out. It's like December and it's, you can see your breath. It's like 20 degrees at night, 20, 30 degrees. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting on the back of the tailgate and here come what it looked like was it looked like a shooting star coming across, and it was a silvery blue colored streak. And you know how like a shooting star has a streak that comes behind it? Mm-hmm. Well, this thing had a streak, and it shot across the sky, and it got over to the right of us a little bit over a tree line, and that thing stopped on a dime and lit up. And it sit there, and it twinkled, and it went around in a circle, and then just as quick as it came, it just boom, shot right back off. But it looked like you ever seen the Star of Bethlehem, how it's got like a spike coming out of the top and the bottom, and then it's got the little spikes coming out of the side of it? Mm-hmm. That's what it looked like. So, wow. I had seen many, many, many falling stars, in my life. I've seen them because it's dark down here. We don't have the light pollution like they do in the cities. I mean, it's just dark down here and we can see everything. But I don't think that any falling stars come in, stop on a dime, light up, and then take back off. So that whatever that was, I mean, if it was military or UFO, it was something strange. very strange. And that happened. There was like 3 or 4 of us that seen that. And I remember them sitting there talking. I said, I don't think that was a shooting star if it could stop like that, you know?
Yeah. And then, that's one thing that, with the I guess, well, they're called UAP now, but I've always called them UFOs because I don't know, it just sounds cooler, I think. But, with those type of encounters, do you, I guess really, like, my question is, do you think people or these crafts or whatever they are, do you think that they make people forget things?
I think it's possible, but I also think that there's people that have a connection with them, and I don't know what my connection is with these things, but I have some kind of a connection with them. And I'll tell you, the reason why I say that is because it would have been in 2016. I had got some footage of a UFO right here beside the house. And about a week before that even happened, I was going out in the yard in the driveway every day and looking up in the sky like I knew something was coming. You know what I mean? I'd go out and I would look like every day. And this one time I got that feeling like you need to go outside and look. And so I went out and I'm looking to the north. And about the northwest in a northwest position, here comes something through a cloud bank, and I'm looking up at it, and I had found a weather balloon while I was fishing down in a strip pit down by my house. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's cool, that's a weather balloon, and so I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and it comes through the clouds and it stops, and it has no wings on it. It's making no noise. And I'm guessing it was about 30 foot in diameter. That's what I'm guessing. And it's sitting on edge. This thing is sitting on edge. And so I went in the house, got some binoculars, and it just stayed there. And so I finally ran back in the house and I got a zoom camera. I got one of those Canon, it was a Canon Rebel at the time, and my wife was into photography, and she bought a zoom lens, like a expensive zoom lens that you could zoom in with it. And so I, by the time I got out there, it had moved up a little bit higher. So I set it on a truck, the camera on the truck, and I zoomed in the best I could, and I ended up getting like 80 photographs of this thing. And I watched it for an hour and 45 minutes. I tried to contact MUFON. I tried to contact my neighbors. I made all these phone calls. I couldn't get a hold of nobody. And so I finally watched it. And the last time I saw it, it took off and it just sped up about the speed of maybe like an airplane or something. And it headed to the south. But when it was sitting there in the air, it was, you know how like the classic UFO, it's like a disc shape and they just kind of hover. Like, you've seen them on like the shows and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, this thing was tilted on edge. Like it was looked like a shield up on its edge is what it looked like.
Oh, wow.
But I sent you a photograph of it, and it was white. It wasn't silver. It was white. And I got a bunch of pictures of it. And one of the pictures I've got, there's this design pattern on the bottom of it. And it looks like it's in the shape of an ear. And then the other side, there was like a square and then a square in the middle. And what it looked like to me was this thing could rotate. Like it would rotate, but I never did see it, like rotate or whatever. And this thing, I watched it so long that I watched a jet go above it and I watched a jet go below it.
Oh, wow.
So, and I thought, man, if I could have got video footage of that plane or some a camera picture of just that with the airplane, I could have got scale. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I could have got the scale of it. But anyway, I watched that, and I don't know why I did this, but I got kind of mad because I was looking at that thing and I thought to myself, there's people that's starving here on our planet. We don't have free energy like we're supposed to. And I'm thinking you guys are up there and you got some kind of free energy device. And then I tried to talk to him telepathic is what I tried to do. I just concentrated and looked up there at that craft. And I just basically told him, I said, if you're not here for the greater good of mankind, then you don't need to be here and you need to leave. But I said, if you're here to help humanity and you want to help us, then that's fine and you can be here. But other than that, if you're not here for the good, you need to leave. So fast forward about 2 weeks later, I'm going home. There's my wife gives me a call, and the neighbors are wanting to have a cookout across the road up in their little campground. And I'd worked a 12-hour shift. I work a high stress job. I work at a hospital and do surgery, and I just was tired. I didn't want to be bugged. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just don't want to be bothered. So there was only 2 ways to get into my driveway, and one I'd have to go around the gravel road, and the one I would come in, and they would be across the road, and they'd probably try to wave me in. And if they got a hold of me, I probably wouldn't be able to get away because I like them, So I told her, I said, I don't want to go. I'm just going to, I'm just going to go on home because I was tired at the time. Plus, I do not only work 12 hours shifts, I'm on call for 12 hours at night too. So if I get called in at 3 o'clock in the morning and have to work the next day, I got to go, it's almost like working 24 hours. So anyway, I go around the square. I'm sorry to be long winded about that, but anyway,
man, hey, you're cooking, man. Keep going.
So I go around the square and come up to the 4-way stop where the gravel meets the asphalt road, and there's a little farm across the street, and there's cows out in this farm, and the clouds were kind of low that day. And as I turned onto that gravel road, heading towards the asphalt road, I get this thought comes into my mind. You need to be looking up here because you're getting ready to see something. And so I get up to the 4-way stop, and I'm not kidding you. This happened because God is my witness. This happened. These light craft, they were looked like white light crafts. They come down out of the clouds, and they hovered right above the clouds. And I'm looking at them. And like I told you, that mind speak thing, they are sitting there, and they're sitting there stationary, and they come down, dropped out at the bottom of the clouds. And the best way I could describe the size of them to you is if you reach your thumb out and you put your thumb out, stretch your thumb out, and you looked at it just in the length of your arm, they were about that size, about as big around as your thumb would be, about the size of a quarter at the end of your thumb, if that makes sense. So they were pretty decent size. And so they're sitting there, and they start to move counterclockwise. And I get this message, and it said, "We're leaving and we're not coming back." And so they went a counterclockwise motion, and then they just shot straight back up into the clouds.
Man.
So that happened. And then I would talk to a farmer that is around this same area, and him and his sons were out he said it was 1:30 in the morning. They was combining, they try to get their crops in. So it doesn't matter what time at night. A lot of those guys will work, way into the early morning, And so he said him and his son sons were out in their combines, and they was picking beans. And he said this craft come down out of the sky, hovered in front of them, shot lights in their cab, circled around them, shining the light in them as it circles around them, and then zips off over to the next combine, does the same thing, zips over to the next one and does the same thing. And so this went on for a while, and they thought that the air guard had put a drone out and was testing the drone on them. So they got fed up with it, and they tried to chase it. And they said when they got in their trucks and tried to go after it, that thing zipped off so fast that there was no way that they was even going to touch it.
Man, that's to me, what's so crazy about that is the fact, like, I come from farmers, like my mom's side, they're all, that's what they do, cattle, farming, pigs, things like that. And when they see something that doesn't make sense to their rational mind, they immediately go, it's gotta be this. And that's why I had to laugh, because I'm like, man, I've heard, I've had family members say, well, we saw this over here, and it could have been, and they come up with some outrageous reason where you're like, that makes no sense. Why would they do that at 1:30 in the morning?
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense to me. Let's see, that UFO incident I was telling you about, that happened to me in 2016, and I forgot to tell you about this. In 2008, me and my wife, we had rented a place, and her neighbor was a second cousin, is an older lady, and she was a second cousin, and she rented this apartment off of her. Well, the way the apartment was, it was her second cousin's house. Then she had a garage attached to it. Then there was a door, and then there was another garage attached to that. And then the apartment we lived in was just a mirror image of what she had. And so my wife got a good deal of renting on the house, or renting the house from her. And so when we first got married, we lived there. and she had some cats, and we'd let the cats in and out at night. And on the back porch, there was this, like the, the lights that are on the back, patio lights or whatever that you turn on so you can see out the back. Well, some people have broke into our cars and ransacked our cars and everything. And so I wanted to put out, some like motion detectors out in front. Well, now her second cousin, she decided she'd just put motion lights out, like the floodlights on the house. So like when you walked in front of them, they'd kick on. Well, she put one right outside the window of our bathroom. And to give you a little idea about how high this was, in order for you to be able to look into that bathroom window because of the way the ground was, in the foundation, you would had to been at least 8 foot tall to see just, at eye level through the window. So this one night I'd stayed up late because I like to stay up late. I was DJing. I used to DJ and mix music and stuff, just something to do for fun, kind of relaxing and fun to do. And so I had stayed up till about 1:30 in the morning. And so I decided I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. So I go and I shut the lights out, and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and I'm looking down the hallway towards the bathroom because the bathroom was just right beside our bed. And, but there's a little hallway you got to go down. So I'm looking back in there, and right behind the toilet, she had like some Venetian blinds that you could, it's the kind that you've got the little, long arm on it, and you twist them and then they'll open and close. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw it, I could see light coming through the window, and I thought, what in the world? I thought, did I leave those lights on? And I was thinking, man, that's stupid. I left the light on for the cat or whatever, because we like to turn our lights out. How it is when you're a kid, you're told to turn the lights out whenever you're not in the room or wherever. And so I thought, what in the world's going on? Because I know I just turned that light out outside. So I walk up there, and I flipped the window blinds down, and I'm not kidding you, man. This happened to me, and people can say that it didn't all they want. I'm not trying to convince nobody it happened, but I was face to face with a black cloaked figure. I could not see the facial features on this thing because it was just like right up in my face. It was on the other side of the window, of course, but it was, and it backed up straight up off the window, man. And I seen it so close that, it had, when I say black cloaked figure, I'm talking about like, it looked like like a robe that a monk would wear, with the, it was kind of like that, but it was black and it was silky, and it waved in the wind, and it looked like, best way I can describe it to you, it looked like it had a sheen to it, like, like it was sparkly, kind of sparkly looking, if that makes any sense.
Like it had like it was like glitter on it or something.
Almost, but it was like, because it was made out of some kind of, just, I don't know, like silky material or some kind of material. I don't know. It just made it kind of sparkle, but it was jet black, if that makes sense, with these little sparkles in it. And so this thing, it backs up off the window. And I would say it backed up probably a good 5 or 6 feet off the window. And so, as it backed up off the window, this thing slowly turns, and it slowly starts turning. If I'm looking at it, it's turning to its right, and it spins around at about a little bit of an angle towards the tree line in the house, and the other lights had kicked on. And so it started to go across the yard, and it didn't have any legs. It was floating off the ground. It was about 3 or 4 foot tall, whatever this thing was in height. And the farther it got away from me, the faster it got. And when it got to the tree line, it looked like somebody ripped a piece of tissue paper out of a tissue box just real fast. And it was just like in the blink of an eye, it shot right up into the tree. So that tells me that it didn't go down in the ground. It went straight up into something.
Whoa,
but
man.
This thing was physical. And then as I'm standing there looking at it, and the first thing that comes to my mind was they found me. And then it had something to do with those eyes that I saw in the woods. And I don't know what the connection was, but about 2 days after I had that encounter, I woke up. My wife had went to work, and I had slept in a little bit, and I woke up, and I had, sleep paralysis. I woke up. I had sleep paralysis. This thing is standing by me in the bed, beside me in the bed, and doing something, and I can't move. I'm paralyzed. Like I cannot move. And then I black out, and then I wake up. From being blacked out. But whatever this thing was had me under sleep paralysis. And
wow, man, wow.
so,
Let me ask you this too, since we're on the sleep paralysis topic.
mm-hmm.
Have you seen shadow people, or do you know what those beings are?
Yes, I have, and I had somebody with me when I saw it. And I honestly, I can't. The one that I saw was it looked like a Native American to me. And the lady I was with she was a clairvoyant, and I said, "Will you come here to our house and look and see if there's anything here?" And so she starts taking me down to this down behind our house where the creek is, and we had those motion or lights on, the back patio light on, and it was lighting. Where I live at, there's big ravines here, like that goes down behind the house, and they it's like a kind of like a gorge, but whenever the lights light it up through the woods, it sends shadows across the top, like in front of you. So we're walking down there, and there's a little bridge we got to walk across to get to the other side. And just as she starts to head across the bridge, it was like something grabbed a hold of her and tried to jerk her off of the bridge. And I looked up, and I seen him running, and he run. Are you still there? He run right down in front of us, and I think he went to our left and run up in through the woods. And it was just a pure shadow, man. And but he looked like a Native American. I could see a feather, and it looked like a feather flicking in his hair when he took off. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and man, that's one thing about I'm getting goosebumps because I've had a few, and eventually I'll get to my story on the podcast, but it's a very long story. But I had somebody. This is probably a couple of years ago actually, and they were telling me that out in Sequoia Bay, I believe, out in OK, Oklahoma, they basically saw this. It was like getting dusk, and it was like this shadow that was darker than the trail. Like someone was standing in the middle of the trail,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't quite see it. Like it was like almost like like a mirage, like when something looks real but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just darker than the trail, and they basically kind of followed them along that trail. But what those shadow entities, shadow people, shadow whatever you want to call them, I don't know what they are. I mean, I don't know if it's a demon or if it's a ghost, or what do you kind of think it could be?
Well, I got a friend that we used to go to powwows and stuff, and my friend, he was like the fire. He kept the fire, and he would offer tobacco to different things. And I showed him some arrow points that I'd found, some stone arrow points that I'd found along the river. And it was over where me and Bud was at. There was, and I didn't really realize it until later on that there was a mound there out in the field that the farmers had bulldozed this mound over. But then the archaeologists came in, and in this mound they found buffalo and elk bones that animals that hadn't been here for hundreds of years. They would have been here when the Indians were here. But we were out in that field, and I found that point. And so I handed him the bag of it because I thought he would think it was cool because it was Native American artifacts or whatever. And when I handed it to him, he freaked out, and he said, "Why'd you hand me that?" And I was like, "Oh man, I didn't mean to do that." And he looked at him, and he went through them, and he said, "Man," he said, "that one you got in there," and it was called a turkey tail. Have you ever seen the turkey tail pit points? They're like almost a blue gray stone with a light colored on the back of them.
I haven't. Yeah, I'm not an arrowhead. I always say this about arrowheads. I know people that hunt them quite often, and I'm always like, "Hey, put it back."
Yeah,
put it back.
Well, I thought they was cool, and because in our family we weren't supposed to talk about the Native American heritage or whatever. Like my grandmother and him, it was like she was raised Catholic, which she'd have been full blooded. So I think she ended up in one of those schools where they took them. You know what I'm saying?
Residential schools.
Yeah. And so it was like they were always ashamed, and they never would talk about it. But then me and Dad, we always talked about it, and we were proud, thinking, you know what, we got Blackfoot Indian in us, and we're proud of that. because we can hunt. When we hunt, we can, we can feel the spirits in the woods, and we try to have respect and everything. So being naive and dumb, I just picked up those arrowhead points when I'd go hunting, or in different areas. So this buddy of mine, he saw that arrow point, and he said, "Man," he said, "that one there," he said, "it's got bad energy," and he said, "I need to come over and help you cleanse that." And so he came over, and he had an eagle feather, and he did some smudging, and he ended up wrapping it. He smudged it and wrapped it up in paper. And I'm not kidding you. When he smudged at that point that he talked about, when he smudged that, we heard a growl. We heard a growl just like come out of the air, like right beside that thing. And so whenever I saw that Indian, I had a dream right after that, and I saw that Indian, and there was a bunch of them in the field beside my house, and I got the message that he wants that point back. And so I had all the points that I had. I took them, and then I offered tobacco. I said a prayer. I dug a hole, and I put them back in the ground from where they came. And so just out of respect.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've told this story before, and I read an article, basically Hardy, the country singer Hardy.
I think so.
He's a country music star. That's what he did, is he went arrowhead hunting, and he brought one home. I think he's out of Tennessee, and he brought one home, and all of a sudden things started moving around in his house, and he basically was real scared about it. He was telling a reporter this. Well, one thing that people don't really talk about, and it's not really, I haven't heard anybody talk about it. I've always been told, when you find something, you always leave it as it was. And you leave it, if you go somewhere in the woods, you always come, you don't change nothing. You don't know whose house you're messing with.
Absolutely.
And, basically, kind of just growing up and hearing these things, and when it comes to those arrowheads, I'll give an example of this. Back when Gene Leroy Hart out of Locust Grove, when he was on the run from, he was the Girl Scout killer out in Oklahoma back in the day, and basically they had to, they put that medicine, this kind of a tracker medicine, on these bullets. And so if you shoot it when he's in the area, the bullet will lead to where he's at, and sometimes it can strike him if he's close enough. But what they would do the same thing, and that medicine's a lot stronger than it was. So, for instance, they'd put medicine on these arrowheads, and they'd shoot them, or they use them as a spear, or however they used them. And sometimes they never hit the target. And so when people go out and they find these arrowheads, they could still have that medicine on it. And so you bring it back with you, it's not for you. It's not intended for you. It's for someone else.
Absolutely. And it took me to have that experience with that, seeing that shadow, like of that Indian in the woods, to know he wants his arrow tip back. And I'm never going to pick another one up. I'm going to look at him if I see him when I walk by, and I'm not just going to leave him untouched. But I've thought that way for years after that, after that happened to me. So, but that people just don't know, man. They don't know. They don't know to do stuff like that. You know what I mean? I was ignorant to it. I didn't know. But if I would have known, I would have never touched it. You know?
Yeah, and that's one thing that it's kind of crazy how, and I mentioned this before, like things are different now than they were in the 70s. And it's so crazy, the generation, 2 generations ago. So they'd be like the baby boomers, they're all gone. All the information and knowledge they had about their grandparents is gone. And so now we have a generation after me, which would be 2 generations, or a generation after me, doesn't know nothing about like 4 generations ago. And so those things get lost. And I have people ask me things from time to time, like, hey, what about this or what about that? And I'm just like, I can only tell you what I was told. And if you get something from it, you get something from it. But
well, I value that,
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always try to, and I'm glad nothing happened to you, because sometimes people will pick things up, and it's, it could be death.
Absolutely.
Could be anything. And but after kind of just I'm trying to get to kind of the topic that I really want to talk about. I mentioned to you before. And so you had these encounters with UFOs. You've had these encounters with Bigfoot. What do you think Bigfoot is?
I think it's flesh and blood creature, and I think it has abilities that we as human beings don't have. And after I've had that encounter, I've been trying my best to get a look at them, to have an encounter with them. And I know that sounds stupid, but I want to, because I believe that I believe they're good. And I know some people think they're bad, and I believe there could be good ones and bad ones, but I think they know how to camouflage themselves so well that it's almost like magic. And if we could learn from these, we could become better human beings. You know what I'm saying? If we could learn from the Bigfoot. So that's what I think they're real. And I believe where I think they live I think they live underground, and I believe they live underground like a beaver would make a nest underground, and possibly because they see them in the creek, around the creeks and small ponds, and they could burrow up underneath a creek bank or a river bank, or even up underneath a pond bank. And like the area that I go to, there's it's a bedrock creek, so it's like got a solid bottom on it. But there's areas there where I can hear the water falling down, sound like it's falling down 20-30 feet down underground. So here's where I think they're at. I think they're, like I said, underground like that. But if something is that big, weighs 1,200 pounds, and you know how big they say they are, and they're huge, and they can basically push a full-grown tree over, or carry a tree, or throw it, or whatever, then they could pull big boulders out the side of a hill and get in a cave and pull that thing back across the entrance of it, and you'd never even know they was there. You'd never get a crane back in there big enough to pull a thing open. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And so with Bigfoot, and so that's kind of giving what you think. What do you think UFOs are?
I think they're maybe the progenitors of life here on Earth, and I think I think the Bigfoot are a victim to them just as we are, and that they get upgrades just like we do. That's what I think. But that's about all I can say about that right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So this is
basically we get taken and they get taken. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We get abducted and they get abducted.
And so about abductions, that's where I was kind of leading you. I was hoping you'd mention something like that. And so the connection, obviously the title of this this live stream and this podcast episode is the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs. Can you give me, maybe what you think or what you know of what that connection is?
They use them. This all goes back to UFO abduction ufology, and there are accounts where people are on board and they see them on board as well. And they say, like, if you were in a state forest and they talk about the 411 people missing in the state forest, say if there was a craft that was hovered over the state forest in an area where it's remote, nobody hardly ever goes in there, and somebody goes in there to encroach, you know what I'm saying? They go in there and they encroach into their area where their perimeter is. These things are become under their control, and they can control them to go out and abduct people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and that's interesting. I've heard this is kind of a crazy, and it kind of pertains to Dogman too as well. And I've heard this theory kind of passed around over the last probably year, is that the orbs that we see, the UFO paranormal type entity or whatever that could be, is that it's like a runoff effect, that like the UFOs have some type of control or some type of say with the Bigfoots, and the Bigfoot have a say on the Dogman. Have you heard anything about that?
The orbs, from what I've been told, is they are a sophisticated drone that comes in. They're the scanning devices that come in the area, and they scan the device before an abduction is going to take place. and you know the rods that they talk about seeing. You know what the
Mhm.
rods are?
Yeah, I've heard of them. Could you explain it to the audience?
The rods are they catch them on film and they move so fast. People think sometimes that they're bugs or whatever, but there's a lot of stuff out there you can watch on them. But those rods will they'll dart in and dart out of the area, and right before an abduction, they'll see those, and they'll see orbs. And there's video footage where you'll see orbs in the house of abductees, and they say that those will come in the house, and basically it's like they're scanning the area for danger. You know what I'm saying? And they can come in a second and scan the whole area, because their technology is so much more sophisticated than us. And I had a doctor that told me that she was abducted as a child, and before the abduction happened, an orb came down the hallway in her and went into her mom and dad's room, looked over there, and then came into her room, and then she was abducted. And when they brought her back, they put her in bed, and she was like banging her head on the wall, like she had like they had just pulled her through the wall. You know what I'm saying?
Whoa.
So, and that's a doctor that's told me that. So, I mean, they just don't make stories up like that. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
they don't want to be the kooky doctor. But
Yeah, they don't want to be the crazy person. Like,
right,
you know,
because
that could hurt business.
Absolutely. But they, friended me in such a way that they, they knew that I would hold their secrets for them. But I mean, I didn't give you any names or anything, but there you go.
That's just fine. You know,
and and that's the thing I hate sometimes about this. People say, "Oh, my source says this and my source says that," and I'm doing it to protect people that I know, because I know that that's things can go wrong real quick. Because I've seen them in the area monitoring things. The like the game wardens, they're involved in it.
In what way? Let me ask you.
Well,
in what way?
I'll tell you exactly what way. I went into. I took my mom mushroom hunting one time, and we went into this state forest, and what had happened was it'd been kind of cold, but we had some rain, and it was in April, so like the temperatures, like the warmest it got would have been about 45 degrees. So this was early mushroom season, so like it would have been like 20s at night, and then it'd get up, and it started. We had a week where it got into maybe like 40s and at noon, but it'd be like 30 degrees at night or whatever. And so the water came up in this place along a creek bed, and it had pushed the leaves out. And so I didn't want my mom falling. I wanted to have a good place to walk around to look for mushrooms, and we thought we'd get there a little early and get to jump on everybody. And so I ended up going in this, got ahead of her a little bit, and I got in this creek bed. I did about a half circle, and then I come up in this little washout. And as soon as I get up in this washout, they say there's some kind of a weather phenomenon that happens when Bigfoot's around or whatever. Now, can I prove it? I can't, but I can just tell you what happened to me. The wind starts whipping up just as I step up on that, out of that little washout. I step up in it. It's like like a little cut where the water rope comes down. So I step up in there, and the wind just all of a sudden, it went from looking like a nice, clear day, sunny, clear day to overcast, and the trees are whipping around like there's a tornado coming through there. And as that happened, I can hear something just hauling to the north of me. It's just going crazy, running through the woods, knocking trees over. I heard it breaking branches and going, and it didn't sound like a deer to me. I've hunted for over 30 years, and I know what a deer sounds like running through the woods, and that's not what I heard. So as I hear that noise running, and it was running into a pine thicket. And I looked down, and down in the dirt, the fresh dirt where the leaves had pushed out, was a perfect footprint, and it looked like, and it was 4 inches long, and it was just one footprint. It was one right footprint, and if that thing would have took a step, it would have made another footprint. So I stopped, and I'm looking at it, and when you see a little footprint like that, you think to yourself, well, there's a kid in here somewhere, because it was just fresh, man, like it was just made. And so I yelled at my mom, and I said, come up here where I'm at. I want to show you something. And so she circled around, And I said, make sure you circle way around because I don't want you to disturb the area in front of me where we're at, because I'm going to track this and see if I can, find it. And so she come around, and I showed her, and I said, what do you think that is? And she said, I don't know. She said, that is weird. I said, you think there's a little kid in here? I said, I'm gonna track it and see if I can't find this little kid. And so I spent probably about an hour or so, walking ahead, looking, trying to find it. I couldn't find nothing. And so I finally looked at her and I said, you know what? I think this was a gift that was given to us. And I think it was probably a juvenile Bigfoot. And so I told her, I said, I'm going home and we're going to get some plaster, plaster cast, and we're coming back and we're going to cast it. So I come back and I plaster casted that thing, and I took it to a Bigfoot conference, and I found this thing in 2018, and I met Cliff Brockman at this. It was a Crypticon down in Kentucky, and I had it in a shoebox wrapped up, so it didn't break. And man, this thing looked pristine. It looked really good. And you could see all the toes, everything, the arch of it, everything. And so I took it, and I my wife and my mom was watching Cliff Brockman there. And so as we're standing there, there's these people ahead of us, and he's got a picture that looked, it was one of the best Bigfoot pictures I ever seen. And he looked at it, and he looked at the guy, and he said, nice try, like just poo-pooed him, like, yeah, that's a fake one. And so the guy left. And so I walked up there, and I just told him, I said, listen, I said, I found something you might be interested in. I said, I'm not claiming it's anything. I said, but it was odd where I found it. And I only found one footprint, and there should have been more. And so I opened the box, and he starts looking at it. And my mom and my wife is watching him, and he's getting excited, like looking at it, and he starts examining it and looking at it. And then he looks at me, and he's got like all this stuff on the table, and like books and autographed stuff and t-shirts. And he looked at me, and he said, what would it take for me to get that from you? And I said, I told him, I said, well, if you want it, I said, I just give it to you. And he goes, I will give you anything on this table right now for that. If you would, let me have it. And I said, I will give it to you because you'll be able to do more with it in a lifetime than I'll ever be, because, you've got good connections and everything. So basically I ended up giving him the footprint, and he wrote an article which you can find it on his Cliff Brockman. And if you go to his official webpage, you can go there and look under impressions. And it says 2018. I think it's the last one on the list, but he wrote a really nice article about it and everything. And he called me on the phone and told me it was one of 4 of the smallest juveniles Bigfoot footprints that they'd ever found. And there's some kind of a detail. There's some kind of a detail on those tracks that they know about. Like I think it's called some kind of a hinge on the foot. You know what I'm saying?
They call it like a mid-tarsal.
Mid-tarsal break. Yes. And I take it that had it on there, the mid-tarsal break. And so fast forward deer season the next year, I'm over at, well, no, let me go back. It was the same year. I got a nice buck during bow season, and I went and I turned him in. And I was checking in my deer out in the back, and I was I befriended this guy because I take deer there all the time, and whenever deer season's in. And he was standing out there, and I said, well, I said, you been doing much hunting? He said, no, I ain't been doing much. I said, well, where do you like to hunt at? And he told me the county that he liked to hunt in. And I said, dude, I said, you gotta look at this footprint that I found, man. He said, I told him, I said, you ain't gonna believe this. So I show him his footprint. He's looking at it, and then he looks up at me, and he just like, it just looks like the blood rushed out of his face, like he got pale. And he said, I'll tell you something here in a minute. Because he had to go back in the thing, and so he left, and he waited because there were some people outside around us at the time, and he waited till everybody left and went inside the house, or not the house, but the meat locker, went in, and he said, he come back out, and he told me, he said, dude, he said, that place over there where you're talking about, he said, I saw 3 of them over there. And so then he started telling me the story about, he saw a male, he saw it was a gray male, he saw a dark colored female, and a little one, a baby one. and while they were mushroom hunting, and he said they threw rocks at him and his buddy, and him and his buddy both saw him. And so fast forward to after the next be spring, I was at a rummage sale with my wife, and I was talking to a guy that was a real estate agent, and somehow we was talking about mushroom hunting, and I didn't say anything about the Bigfoot or nothing. And he starts telling me, my buddy that likes to mushroom hunt, he was mushroom hunting, and he said he saw Bigfoot come down the hill. He heard him, and he looked up and seen him, and he said they locked eyes, and he said it was a big gray one, and he said that thing saw him and spun around and went back up the hill. He didn't try to attack him or nothing. But that's two people in two different, in the same area, but in two different places that seen the gray one. And my neighbors that live across the street, he's a preacher, and then it's his wife and his dad were coming down our road, and they probably about 7 miles north of where we're at. It was coming down the road, and it was in the middle of the night, and they was coming up a hill, and they saw somebody walking alongside the road. And him being a preacher, they like to take care of like the homeless people and help everybody out. And when they first seen the guy walking down the road, they thought because it was like late at night, they thought, well, maybe this is a homeless guy, and they was going to stop and talk to him. And so the closer they get, the bigger he gets, the more dirty and mangy this guy looks, and they get right up next to it. And he's walking in the opposite direction that they're coming, in the other lane of the road that he's walking. And he, I don't know if you looked at him or not, but as soon as they got right up there, they were looking out the window. They had to lean down to look up at him. That's how big he was. And they said he just went right up the ravine, like the hill going off side of the road, which is pretty steep in the area where they showed me where he went. But he went up the hill, went down over the bank, and then headed towards the river bottoms. So there's another river bottom connection. And that that area there, those lights I was telling you about, those orange orbs or whatever, I still see them to this day, and I see them in that area. And I sent you some video of that white one, the white one that's taken off. If you watch that video real close, you'll see the white disc. It'll shoot into the clouds, and then if you look behind it, there's two white Tic Tacs that follow right in behind it. That's at a quarter speed. That's as slow as I could get it to slow down.
Dang, that was fast too.
Yeah, and when I took that video, and it I was getting ready to delete it, and I thought, well, I better look I better look and see if there's anything on this while I was at work. So I just pulled it up, and I'm looking, and boom, I seen that thing streak across the sky. And here's the weird part about it. The area where I caught it, I was with my wife. We were driving down the road. The sky looked funny, like it was orangey. It just looked odd to me. And then I get that thought and that feeling. I told my wife, I said, I need to record this. I need to take a video of these clouds because I feel like they're around. And that area where I got that video was right where I had that encounter with the eyes in the woods. So that craft that you see right there, there's some more proof that there's some high strangeness going on in this area.
Let me ask you this too.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I want to go back to the question that I'm wanting to know kind of what you think is the cover up of the park rangers. Is that happening?
I think so. I think it is. But I got to think, I don't know if you've heard about the elite hunting parties. You know what I'm talking about? That's kind of a, how I say.
We
probably shouldn't mention it.
I was about to say, that's kind of a danger.
But anyway, it's going to be either one of two things. It's either going to be that, or it's going to be the UFO things.
Okay.
And I think they're using the Dogman and the Bigfoot to basically capture people in the forest. I think that's what they're doing. And when I say they're using them, if you go to the abduction ufology thing, like a lot of people try to poo-poo it, and they don't. But there's a lot of research. If you get to research and you know who to look for, a lot of that stuff has been taken down. And a lot of those people were murdered, or mysteriously come down with illnesses, or were hit by cars or whatever. But they can take those people under control. They can take human beings under control and make them walk on the ship. You know what I'm saying?
And
they
Did the
can make
game
you.
Did the game wardens have something to do with this though?
Well, I was going to get back to that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to take you off. I'm so curious about this.
That's okay. Well, when I met when I found that footprint and met Cliff Brockman or whatever, I met a guy he lived in Rhode Island, and he ended up coming, and what he was going to do was he was going to start on one side of the United States and go through where there'd been Bigfoot encounters, and he was traveling all the way to the West Coast, And what he was looking for was, believe it or not, for the Bigfoot he was looking for healing, because he had heard that they was able to heal people. That's what his belief was, And I don't think any bad about him or anything. If that's the way he thinks, that's the way he thinks. So I met him, and I was telling him about the eyes that I seen in the woods, and he wanted to come and stay. And I said I'd let him camp out in the front yard and stuff. And I told him, I said, if you want to have an experience, we'll go down there. And I looked on Google Earth where I figured that they might be in that state forest area where me and my mom had found the footprint. And so you're going to like this one. I took him to this place. And so we go back in there, and this was right after I found the footprint. And I took him in, I showed him the exact spot where I found it. The water had come up and down so much, it had washed everything away. So of course it wasn't there, because it was months and months later. So I'm looking, and there's a guy in your chat room here. His name's Bushwhacking with the Rooster. You can see him in the chat room right there. And he goes in and he looks for tree bends and X's and different things, he looks for sign, and he tries to track, so that's what we were doing. We were going in looking for structure, and we're looking for tree bends and different things. So I go in there and I'm looking, and we didn't find any tree bends or anything. So I took him down to this road that we were on. If you go down so far on it, it says the state of Indiana no longer maintains this road. So it goes basically to a kind of a rougher road, and you go back in there, and there's a campground back in there. And so on Google Earth, I looked to see where the largest tract of land was, and I thought, well, if it's going to be anything in here, they're going to be in this part of it, because it's the deepest part of the woods, And so we pulled in. He pulls his van in, and what he had like one of those it was like a Sprinter van type thing that he'd converted into a trailer. And in his van, he had his pots and pans hanging up. You know what I'm saying? And he had some things magnetized to the wall so it wouldn't fall off while he was driving. But some of that stuff, like if the vehicle would rock back and forth, it would shake, and make no pots and pans would cling or whatever if the vehicle would shake. So he parks his van there, and we get out. He gets a little fire going, and when he had pulled in, there was like a little pothole in the parking lot. Well, he parked to where one of his back wheels was off the ground, like it wasn't down in that down in the pothole. So if you stepped up in that van, everything would sway in the van, and it'd make a lot of noise, like there's a lot of rattles and stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gets the fire going, and he's smoking a cigar, and he cuts the back of the cigar off, and he's getting ready to throw that tobacco away. And I said, can I have that tobacco? And he said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I'm going to offer the tobacco to him, and I'm going to say a little prayer. And so I went over to the fire. I did the 4 directions, offered the tobacco, told him, I said, we're not going to try to record you. We're not going to try to take any pictures of you. We're not here to cause any trouble. We just want to have an encounter with you. We want to know that you're here, and we come in peace, and we want to leave in peace, And then I tossed the tobacco in the fire or whatever. And so, long story short, the fire goes down. It gets late. We're sitting at a picnic table, and I had a Native American flute with me, and I since then have learned you're not supposed to whistle in the woods at night. And so I decided I'm going to play him a little tune, I'm come in peace, and I'm going to play him a little tune, So I start playing the flute, and the fire basically just goes out, and it's dark. You can't see nothing. Like you couldn't even see the hand in front of your face, because we're talking big timber here, like big oak trees and old growth forest is what we're in. So we're sitting there, And I'm looking at him across the picnic table. His van is right behind him. Off to the left of me is where I parked at, and then off to the side, the left of that is some trees that's maybe about 6 inches in diameter, and there's 2 of them that's sticking up, kind of like forked out or whatever. But you can see through those trees, but not in the dark. You know what I'm saying? You can't see in the dark. But anyway, that's the location. So as we're sitting there, I just happen to turn and I look over towards my vehicle in the pitch dark, and these electric blue eyes light up in the dark. And I said, "Look," I said, "they're right there." I said, "He's right there." And he looked over there at it, and it was lean. It looked like to me it leaned around those little sapling trees, and it had its head cocked at an angle. And they were probably the eyes. Those eyes were about the size of a quarter, but they were almond shaped. You know what I'm saying? Like the bigger round part would have been towards the nose, and then the point would have went out towards the ears. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But they were almond shaped, and they were electric blue, if that makes sense. But they didn't light up to the extent of where it lit anything up like the other eyes. So we're sitting there looking at it, and he starts talking to it, and he said, "Thanks for coming and seeing us." He said, I like your eyes. Your eyes are really pretty. And this thing tilts its head back and forth. You know how a dog, if it's curious, it tilted its head back and forth. But this thing was I would say at least 4 foot tall. At least it wasn't like a dog looking around a tree. They were silent. And so those eyes go out, and then I'm looking off behind him, and in between my car and his van, more eyes appear. So I don't know if this thing walked over there in the dark or if there was another one. And so, I'm looking at it, and I said, there's a set of them right there behind you. And so he looked over there, started talking to him again, started doing the same thing. They was about the same height, about 4 feet tall, and blue eyes, electric blue eyes. And I'd never seen anything like it other than those yellow eyes that I saw in 94. But anyway, those finally went out, and then off to my right, another set appeared. But before, I should have told you before that started, when I hit that flute, we could hear something down in the bottom talking back and forth, and it sounded like gibberish, like that, like this ravine that goes down probably a good 80 to 100 foot, just down, like straight down. And we could hear him down in the bottom, and it sounded like it was kind of muffled, but it was kind of like the what do they call it? The Sierra sounds, like that samurai chatter.
Yeah.
Well, it was like that, and you could hear him down in there, and it was like they was talking back and forth, and they'd be like, rah, 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 back and forth. But before that started, a big hoot owl thing started hooting right beside us in the dark, in this big tree. And after that thing hooted, it sounded like something slid down the tree, and then it jumped from one side of the ravine to the other, and then hit with a big thud, like you could feel it in the ground. And so anyway, that happened. So we're sitting there, and that thing left, or, the eyes went out or whatever. And so then one appeared to my right, and then that one went out. And so we were sitting in the dark for a while, and we got to talking, and we were talking about something, and it was like something that was aggravating, like an aggravating conversation of, how, like, you talk to your buddy about you frustrated about this or frustrated about that. It was one of them conversations. And so he said, he thought to himself, he said, well, maybe we probably should change the subject and try to, go back, because they're probably listening and they don't want to come in because they think we're getting aggravated or scared or whatever. And so I played the flute one more time. And when I did, I set it down on the table, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And I told him, I said, dude, I said, I don't know how I know this, but I said, whatever those things are, I said, they're right behind me. And there was this little hill that kind of went up in the woods right there behind me. And he looks up behind me, and I didn't even turn around and look. He looks up behind me, and he said, man, he said, there's not just one up there. He said, there's 3 of them. And I turned and I look up the hill, and there's 3 sets of eyes right above the hill. They're looking down at us.
Man.
So then those go out, and then we are sitting there again, and the last one that we saw appeared behind his van. And when the eyes went out, this thing either got up on top of his van or got inside of his van and was looking around, because it shook his van. Whatever this thing was, it shook his van. And that happened. And
were you scared at all?
No.
Oh my goodness.
And I really wasn't. But I'll tell you, I'm kind of, I don't know why, but like, I used to go down the river bottoms and deer hunt, and I bow hunt, and I would bow hunt by myself, and it'd take me 20 minutes to walk along the riverbanks in the dark. And like most mornings I'd have moonlight to walk by, you know what I mean? And we're talking big acreage, and I would walk in the dark by myself along the riverbanks. I never really was scared, but there's been times when I've hunted, I've had things circle me or whatever, but I don't go out in the woods now without a flashlight. I can tell you that. But
Man,
really, any of these encounters that I'm telling you about, I know people's going to say, yeah, right. This is a lie or whatever. It's not. It happened to me. I can't unsee it. And I was not afraid. And there is that part of the UFO connection. You know what I'm saying? Do they have a way that they can calm you down? You know what I'm saying? Because I never was afraid. I never was afraid of it.
Man, I'd be out of there. I ain't gonna lie.
I know. Most people. Well, that guy told me. He basically told me. He said, "You're one of the bravest SOBs that I've ever met." And this is an older man, telling me this.
Man,
and
do you think that it's because it's probably because of your childhood and having a mentor like the guy, the vet, the Vietnam vet?
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of just letting you know, hey, I see these things all the time. This is how you interact with them to make it to where they don't try to run you off, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think so. But I've never ran from anything like that.
Well, they never say run. Like they always say, yeah, because like that's when it's like what is it, the predator prey instinct or whatever they call that. Just with any animal, you start running, it's just something in them. I think
I had the only thing that I've ever really been scared of in the woods while I was deer hunting is I was coming out one night and the coyotes was all around, and there was 14 of them that down on the ground, and I had two hunting knives on me, and I had both hunting knives in my hands walking, but that's the most scared that I'd ever been. To get back to the game warden thing. So anyway, I saw those eyes or whatever, and he traveled all the way across country. Do you know who Greg Yost is, the Squatch Man?
That sounds very familiar.
Well, he had stayed with Squatch Man before he came over here where I'm at, and he had the same kind of experience with Squatch Man. He saw the same kind of eyes, but the color of the eyes were different. He saw pink eyes and orange and yellow, but he never saw the blue like we saw where I was at. And he went all the way across the country, and he met up with Matthew Johnson. I don't know if you've ever seen. Matthew Johnson was like an NBA player, and I think he was a psychologist or something like that. But anyway, he's got a place out west where you can actually go and try to have an experience with Bigfoot, because he saw one and it scared him. He saw one watching his family while they were walking on a trail. He went up in the woods and could see this thing watching his family. But anyway, my friend David, he went all the way out there, and he told me, he called me after he got to where he was going out there, and he told me, he said, because he had some kind of an experience out there, but it wasn't nothing like what he had with me. And he told me, he said, I just wanted to let you know that experience that I had with you, he said, that just totally made my year. So after we had that experience with the eyes, I'd found the footprints. I sent you the picture of that little footprint.
Yep.
I went back a year to the day, because I thought, well, then they're moving through that area in that time of year. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back in there and look. And so me and my mom, we go back in there again, and we get back there where that footprint was. And I'm not kidding you. There was a tree in there about 8 inches in diameter, which is a pretty good sized tree. It was probably 30 foot or 40 foot tall, and something had bent that tree. That tree was alive. It wasn't like top of a tree had broke over and fell on it and bent it or anything like that. Whatever did this, they bent that tree over, wrapped it around another tree, and then they jammed the top of it in the ground in the creek bed. So it made a perfect bow, and it was probably, I couldn't have touched it. I mean, if I'd have lifted up, put my hand up in the air, but it made a perfect arch, and it was in the exact spot where I found that footprint. It was like they marked that area. You know what I mean? So let's see, it would have been last February. It was last February. I go in that area and I go back in there by myself, and I'm looking around, and I had went down. It would be, let me think. It would have been west of where it was in between where I found the original footprint and where I had the encounter with the eyes with my friend. And so I went in between there, and I bought one of those Nikon 900 cameras that zoom way back up in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So I was basically, what I was doing was I was walking 100 yards, zooming in, filming, taking pictures all the way around. There's a guy by the name of Paul Chafin. They go in and they take pictures, photographs, and then they're catching stuff that looks like Dogman and different things like that. And so that's what I was doing. And I was like, old Rooster does here. I was going in and looking for structures as well. But anyway, I'd go in there, I'd move about 100 yards, and then that thing will zoom in way out. I don't know if you can like zoom in on craters with the moon. And I think NASA bought the patent out for it. And I don't think you can even get those anymore because you can see so clear photographs on the moon with them.
Dang,
and it'll take video of the moon. So anyway, I've got one of those. I'm moving 100 yards through the woods. I go up the ridge top, and I'm coming back out. And as I'm coming out, I get within. I'm up on top of a great big ridge top, but I'm within probably 100 yards or so, or maybe about 250 yards, I'd say, of the road. Well, I'm up there in the big timber, so I'm behind big trees, and there's no way they could have seen me because I was just barely peeking around the tree. I could hear a car coming down the road. And so I'm watching his car. It comes down, and he may have had a thermal on me. He come down and he stopped. He had some kind of emblem on the side of his vehicle. And what I thought was unusual about it was it had like one of those wrap things on the steering wheel. It was like a pink color or a fluorescent orange or something. And it had some kind of emblem on there, like some kind of a business thing. And so he stops there in front of me. So I waited till he gets on down the road. And he's heading towards where my vehicle's parked. So I make my way out. I go down the road. I get down there, and I get to my vehicle. And I don't know if you deer hunt or not, but hunters are notorious for looking at detail. Like you can go when you hunted as long as I have or whatever. You go in an area and you looking at everything. Every branch and twig or whatever. And so, and in my dad being a Vietnam vet and Bud, they always told me, you always look at the detail, you're looking for footprints or whatever. They taught me how to track and do all kinds of stuff. So I get up there to the truck. There's a cigarette butt laying right behind my truck door. Whoever it is has come up there and they've looked in my truck window. And so, I got in the truck and I went down the road where I found the first set of footprints. So I get out of the truck. And it's cool out. It's nice and cool. Like I said, it was in February. So I get out of the truck. I go up, and this creek that with the bedrock in it's got a little bit of water in it. So you got to kind of navigate these boulders to get back up in there. And then once you get in there, it's kind of flat, but you got to really watch because it's slick, slick mud or whatever. And I'd been up in there once before, and it was dry. We kind of had like a little dry spell, and it had dried up the creek, but there was this one little puddle there. And this was before this happened. But anyway, I walked in there and I walked around the corner. I wasn't there maybe a minute. And I turned around and I come back, and there was a one footprint where he had walked in the water, and he had walked on the bedrock, and it was probably 14 inches long at least. Big footprint. And it looked to me like he made one leap down off the rocks on one foot and then hopped up onto the other side. And I didn't see any other. I looked around, couldn't find no footprints. I didn't hear nothing either. Dang. And so that specific morning where that car went by, I went down in there, got out of the truck, started heading down the creek. What my plan was I was going to go up the creek, take that Nikon and move about 100 yards and start hitting, taking photographs at, every 100 yards or so, panning around, zooming in, taking series of shots so that I could go back and look at the photographs. So I go over there, I get right to those boulders and get ready to start heading up in there. And I get this feeling like you better pay attention because there might be something here you might want to see. And so I backed up out of that creek, and I got out in the gravel. And I kid you not, right there in the gravel was a juvenile big footprint and a adult footprint, and they were toe to toe, and they were perfect, and they were it was right in the gravel road, like they had come out of the creek. They had come out of the creek, walked into the gravel road, and they walked in such a way that when a car run over it, it was going to smash that down to where you wouldn't be able to see it. And I'll send you the photographs that I've got of it. I took photographs.
Definitely.
So I made a little short video and was saying, I feel like I'm blessed. I said, this is just awesome, because every time I find something like that, I feel like it's a gift, like I just feel like it's a blessing,
Well, you were meant to see it.
Yes. And the only thing that I can figure, the reason why they're doing this is because my mother-in-law was handicapped. So she was on a walker, and then later on she's on a wheelchair. Well, before I found that little footprint, I took my mother-in-law. I went in there before. I went in there with a picnic table, and I set a picnic table up with balloons and different things like that, because it was just a beautiful area, and she really loved beautiful, like nature scenes and stuff, like scenery and stuff. And so my wife, I told her, I said, I'll go ahead, get everything set up, and then you guys come. So we ended up having a birthday party right there in that creek where I found those footprints. And I think they may have been watching, and then I think they may have seen me and my mom in there. And I think they put that. I think the mother either stamped the baby's footprint in the ground to say, I'm in here with my child as well. If I know that sounds stupid, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So I find those footprints. I take a video of it. I talk about it. I was going to put it online, but I never did. I don't know why, but I just didn't. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at those footprints. So I thought, well, I found these. I'm going to go on up in there and look for some more. And so I went up in the creek, and I went back where we had the birthday party, and I went right around the corner, and it wasn't probably a matter of a minute, me walking up there and going around the corner. I hear this car coming. So I turn around, I come back out. And as I'm coming out, there's the game wardens, and they stop right in the creek, and they're looking right at me. And of course, when the game warden stops and he's looking at you, you got to go and talk to him, because, you're already suspect number one because you're out in the woods and you got a camera, so they're going to interrogate you. So I just went on ahead and walked on up there to him. So I get up there, and he said, have you, what you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just out taking pictures, with my camera, I said, it's real pretty here, and I really like it, And so they said, have you happened to seen a car around here, like a little white SUV? And I said, yeah. I said, it got a little emblem on the side of it. I said, does it have a pink steering wheel or orange steering wheel? And they said, yeah, that's it. He said, where is he? Like they were acting like, we're going to get him, And so I told him, I said, well, I seen him when I come in. He was down at that other parking spot down there. And I said, and besides that, I said, I seen him go by while I was up in the woods. And I said, somebody got out and looked in my vehicle. And I said, there was a cigarette butt on the ground that wasn't there when I got out. I said, somebody got out and looked inside my vehicle. And he said, well, did they take anything? And I said, no, they didn't take anything. But I said, somebody was looking in there. But I said, yeah, he's down there at the next parking lot. So, like I said, they acted like they was going to go get him, like he was busted, they was going to get him. And so I let him go on down through there, and I waited about 5 or 10 minutes. So I go and I get in the truck, and I head down that way, and there they are down there with this guy, and they're talking to him like they're best buddies. And I know he's some kind of a tracker, just the way he is, you can tell he's one of them people that go in and they can track stuff. I can just tell by the way that they're going at it. And it was just like they knew that Bigfoot had been in there somehow, and they run over those tracks. They covered those tracks up when they went through there, but it was because those Bigfoot had walked in the road. And I thought, man, that is so smart. They're walking in areas where they know that the traffic's going to cover their tracks.
Oh,
that is sophisticated. That's beyond animal, man. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And a human being would do that. You know what I'm saying? A human being would do that if they were smart, to hide.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's that's interesting. No, I just kind of, so the guy that was, so they went down, and they were like, did you hear anything that they were saying?
No, I didn't. Because I thought I'm just going to get out of here because this is weird. There's activity here. There's footprints. There's big footprints here. They've just showed up just as I've showed up, and I've literally just found it, and they're right there within minutes. Now, could it have been a coincidence? It could have been, but I think there's something about them that they know that they're real, because I worked with a guy that was a state policeman from Maine. And he had done all kinds of things. He was an anesthesiologist. He was an anesthesiologist. He'd been a pilot. He flew like private jets around, flying people around in private jets. And he was a state police officer in Maine. And I asked him one day, I said, "So do you think that Bigfoot stuff's real?" This was before any of this happened to me. And he said, "Man," he said, "I know they're real." He said, I knew the game wardens up in Maine, and he said 2 of them told me, they said, "It's absolutely real, and we know all about it." And then I had Bobo from Finding Bigfoot. I talked to him when we talked to Cliff Brockman, and my wife and my mom was standing there, and my wife started talking to him, and she said something about, "Well, you think they're real or whatever?" And he looked at my wife, and I didn't even ask the question, she did. And he said, "Yeah, they're real." And he said, "We've got the evidence to prove it, but the networks won't let it be put on the air." So there you go.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's a connection to the UFOs, and they don't want us to know about it. They don't want it, because once that cat is let out of the bag, that these things can come in, they can come and snatch you. And you know what I'm saying? Like these UFOs can come in, or aliens or whatever, come in and snatch you or whatever, then it would just create mass panic. And then if they have something to do with our DNA, like manipulating our DNA, because all of the abduction experiences that like the alien abductees, that's what they are shown, that there's a hybrid program underway, that they are mixing human and alien DNA to the point where they're going to walk amongst us, and you're not going to know.
You know what's crazy? I'll tell you this. So I was told this, I don't know, I might have been a elementary, middle school age kid, and I have family members who can testify to this, but I don't like using the word testify, but they know what I'm talking about. But long time ago, and I might have mentioned this before, but the star people came down before removal, and gave these tectonic type plates to each tribal town. And this is Muskogee Creek information. And these plates were given to these different tribal towns to hold. Now I was never told what they did and what those plates did, but they would bring the medicine. They would bring knowledge to the people. And one day they kind of decided that these star people were like, "Well, you guys are getting away from your origins. You're getting away from what you're supposed to be doing, and we're not going to come back anymore." And some of the star people didn't want to go back, but they look just like us. And it's kind of crazy. Now, I'm not saying anyone, is half or a quarter or, a 16th alien. I ain't saying none of that. I'm just saying
maybe we all are.
Maybe, there's something to that story that I have always, and my grandpa, that was one of his thoughts. Like, that was one thing that he always said. He would talk about it. It's like, man, I wish I knew, I wish I could go back and see that. He always wanted to know where those plates were, because those plates up until I think like the early 1900s were still around. And they got lost during removal and, moving around and whatnot.
I had heard a story similar to that there was, I think it's earth, wind, fire, and water, that there were 4 plate things like that. And like, the white people were given 1 plate, the white race was given 1, and they say like they controlled, say maybe fire, and then the Indians controlled the land, and then the black people controlled the water, and then like the Asians controlled something else. I'd heard something similar to that.
It's definitely pretty interesting because I'm like,
yes,
especially with the cover up aspect that I'm so intrigued by, because I've read different articles put out by, especially here in Oklahoma. They talk about, like, they won't even acknowledge that there's a Black Panther here in Oklahoma.
mm-hmm.
And I got like 20 stories of people telling me they seen one.
Yeah, I had a guy that lives in the woods up the holler from me on the highway. His motion detector kicked on at night, and the light, and he saw one up by his garage, and it was a Black Panther. But they'll tell you they don't exist. Well, here's one for you. They told us here in Indiana that we didn't have bobcats. They tell us we don't have bobcats, and we don't have mountain lions. And you know what I got pictures of? When I was 23 years old, I climbed a tree and got a bobcat kitten out of the top of a tree and took it home, and I raised it for about 6 months and let it stay with me. And it ended up going up to the neighbors, and then it got bigger, and then it got wild, and then it just kind of wandered away. But my neighbor Bud, my buddy, the Vietnam vet,
Mm-hmm.
like, it come up missing, and I told him, I said, I don't know where he went. I said, I'd let him out every morning. He would go outside, and you know what the first thing he'd do? He'd go up to a pine tree, and he'd figure eight it, rub it back and forth like he was getting that scent in his coat. And then he'd go up on a branch, and he'd pace back and forth. It was the coolest thing. And I called him old Bobcat. And so I told him, I said, I ain't seen him for a long time. And he said, man, he's up there in my barn. He said, he hangs out up in the barn. I think he said, I think he's chasing rats and stuff like that. He said, I'll pull in, and he said, he'll be laying up there in the hayloft with his paw hanging over, looking at me. And I told him, I said, man, if you don't want him up there, I said, I'll come up there and get him. And he said, no, man. He said, he's cool as hell. I want you to just let him do his thing. But there were some Amish that lived on the backside of him, and they caught Bobcat in a trap and killed him. So, but that was the end of him.
Yeah, so there's all these different animals, and that they say, and like I said, I've read these articles, and they're like, oh, there's no possible way that it could be, there could be a Black Panther, or there could be this, and I don't know, I don't know what's, I know animals are they move, they do move, just because they're in Northeast, Arkansas, or Southwest Mississippi, that doesn't mean that they're just right there. No,
that's right.
They're moving all over the place.
I had a buddy that was fishing. We got like old coal mine went through here and made a bunch of strip mine fishing ponds and stuff like that. And one of my buddies, he knew all the farmers around, and he would go. He was actually the one that we'd seen the shooting star, and it lit up and stuff at night. And he went and was fishing a pond. And like I said, that down here, like, things have gotten a little bit more, populated, but not much. Not down here. I mean, it's still kind of like a Wild West, if you will. But he would go down to this pond and fish in the evening, because he could pull his truck up there, and he'd get into cattails and fish for bass or whatever. And he said he was standing there one night, and he said he heard something coming through the cattails across from him, and he said, here come Black Panther out. And that Black Panther looked over him and seen him, and he smacked the water and went, wow, made that real loud sound that they make, and then turned around and run off. But there was accounts when, like, we were coon hunting and stuff, of coon dogs would come up out of there was a thing called Green County Hill. I'm just, the locals only know what it is at, but this thing called Green County Hill, and they would send their dogs in there, and they'd hear them yelping, and they'd come out, and these dogs would be slashed from behind their shoulders all the way back, like somebody got a hold of them with claws and just ripped them, just shredded them.
Mm-hmm.
But and they said that they could hear something that sounded like a big cat in there, so they figured that those big cats were down in there. Then that one place where I used to deer hunt, the farmer told me that they found a baby calf pulled up into a tree, and it had been eaten on. So that tells you the cats will do that. They'll pull up animals up in a tree and eat on it, especially a cougar. In that area, one night I was coming back. I had worked I used to help build TVs back when they had TV tubes and stuff like that. I helped build some TVs, and that was my job, and I would work the second shift, so I would get home about 1:30 in the morning, and I was coming down that area where I hunted down along the river bottoms, and coming out of the he crossed the street in front of me and out of a hog lot, and he got right on the other side, and it was getting close to deer season. I thought, oh man, cool, I'm going to see a buck, and he's heading over to the woods I like to hunt. And I slowed down, and he stopped, and he turned, and he looked at me, and it was a big old mountain lion, and he was heading right down to the river bottoms. And so, but the game warden said, "Oh, they don't exist here." And now, guess what? Now they're making a season for them here because there's so many of them we got here. Now we're seeing them all the time.
I think it's because I just think it's like, I watch a show. It's and I can't remember his name now, Jesus. But there's a show. Oh, Forrest Galante. He has a few shows on Discovery Channel, History, all those different. But he finds extinct animals, and they have footage of a tiger that was supposed to be extinct for like 100 years, and they got a video and pictures of it. And so that's one thing that, like, we look back, over, especially here in Oklahoma, and I'm sure in your area, you have like these tales or these legends of this, whatever this creature could be. We're getting to the 2-hour mark.
Okay.
I want to ask you one more question. And
okay.
And it's, have you heard any dogman stories out there?
I have not heard any dogman stories. The closest thing to a dogman story that I would have for you would be, I just found out recently about this. There's something that people see around here that they call a shadow beast.
Oh, okay.
And the person that I know that it personally happened to was driving down this road, and they saw a what they thought was a dog on the side of the road. And this particular person is one of those people that helps wounded animals, and just very kind person. And so they see this animal laying on the side of the road, and they thought, when they first saw it, they thought it was one of those like a black chow, like a big black chow dog, how they're pretty good size. So, and it's laying down on the side of the road. So she stops the car, backs up to it, and gets it right up to where it's at, and it's gone. It's disappeared. So she goes back the next night, going down the same road again, and she sees it again. And she gets out, and she gets up close, like she's walking up close to it, and boom, it's like gone again, because she's calling for it, yelling for it, and she stood there and yelled for it and looking for it. So the third night, she goes back thinking that it's wounded, and she thinking maybe it'll come back out and she'll find it this time. So she's at the crossroads. And right across this particular crossroad, there's at an angle, there's this little lot where it's there's maybe like 4 trees, but they're spread out in there, like they're not very big. They're like saplings, like somebody's just planted them, but you can see through there. It's real clear. And there's a street light at this particular crossroad, and it's lighting that field up. And so she sees that thing out in that field. So she parks the car, she gets out, she walks over there, and she's standing there at the crossroad, getting ready to walk over into the grass where it's at. And it's standing in the middle up by in amongst the trees, and she can see the shape of it. Looks like, what she thinks is a dog. She said, I just out of nowhere, this thing is just coming at her. And she said, it's just charging at her like a buffalo. And she said that the legs on it, how a buffalo, when they start coming at you, like both legs are just, hoofing at you. You know what I'm saying? Hoofing. And she said this thing is charging her, and it's coming right at her at full force. And she said it was so fast that just before it hit her, she knew it was going to knock her down. And just before it knocked her down, she closed her eyes and turned her head, and that thing just disappeared. But
wow.
She said it looked like a buffalo, like the front end of a buffalo, and that's how it moved, she said. So
wow.
Real quick before you go, I know it's the 2-hour mark. The game warden, like I said, I seen the game wardens in there, seen those footprints. So then I went back to another area on the other side where this creek comes out, and there's another parking area up there because it's an area where you can deer hunt. So I had went back in and was taking pictures again, like I was telling you. And I don't know if you know what Oregon Energy is. Do you know what a hex suit is? They make a hex suit that's for hunting. Like people can walk up on turkeys with it. Like it cancels out your biofield energy in your body. You know what
okay.
I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well, I make these things called they're orgone, basically orgone generators. I've studied a little bit about Wilhelm Reich and know how to make some different orgone cloudbusters, different things like that. And I made these this orgone things, and when I wear those, like I don't know what it is, but when I wear them, it's like the deer, like you know how like I've hunted for so long that the deer, like whenever they come in, they will look right at you, even if you're not, you know, like if I'm 20, 30 feet in the air, like they've got a 6 inch, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like they sense an energy coming off of you, and they can see it. And I think it's attached that they're covered in hair, and that is attached to their nervous system, and somehow that acts as an antenna. That's kind of what I think. But anyway, these little devices that I make will knock that field off of your body. It takes your bioelectric field and it takes it in, and then it's works as a piezoelectric thing, a device, energy device. And it's not like witchcraft or anything like that. You can go on MIT and look up quartz crystals and the piezoelectric thing. That's basically what it is. You put quartz crystals under pressure and it'll do this. So anyway, that's what I use when I go in the woods and I'm looking for these things. And those pictures that I sent you, that thing peeking around the tree, I had those devices with me, and I went in there and I got all kinds of pictures that night. And I think I sent them to you. But, so I go back in there because I got all those pictures, and they was like nice, clear looking. I thought they was clearer than I'd ever gotten. Pictures of like the face of that thing peeking around the tree. And then I got the picture of those Indians, look like Indians looking around the tree. And so I decided I'm going to go back in there. Well, I go back in there a couple days later, and I'm around the corner to go there, and there's a black SUV sitting there with black tinted windows. And I thought, nope, not going in there.
Oh, man.
I left there, and then probably about 3 or 4 days later, I go back in there. But I usually take this horse trail up in there because there's horse trails, you know, crisscross through there. I usually take a horse trail and go back around in there and look and take my picture. So I thought this time I'm going to go in off the road because my friend Bushwhacking Rooster, he looks for those X's and different structures. And so I went in an area where I found a structure down below where the horse trail was. Well, that takes you into the creek where I got all those photographs, right? So I go back in there, and I'm getting into ground zero where I caught all the, you know, the good footage and the pictures. I get in there, and I'm looking up the hill up towards the horse trail, and I see something up there. It looks like, you know, like hunters will chain like a tree stand to a tree, and they'll use like it's like a chain, but it's like a cable thing, you know, goes into a box with a lock. And I thought, what is that thing? Because the other day when I was in there, it wasn't there, because I'd walked right by it and I would have seen it because I'm paying attention, you know. And so I'm looking up there. So I went and I had the scales about straight up, grabbing hold of saplings, pulling my way up there. If I'd have fell, I'd have got hurt, you know. And so because I thought, well, somebody put a camera up there on the tree. And so I get up there, and there's this box, and it's probably about 1.5 feet wide, 1.5 feet tall, and probably about 10 or 12 inches deep. And it's got a lock. It's locked to a tree. And I thought, wow, the game wardens or somebody's come up in here, and they've put some kind of electronic device or a camera up there. So I go and I look around the front of it, and I couldn't find any hole for a camera. So I don't know what kind of device that thing was. I've never seen it before. Or ever seen one since, and I don't know what it was. So there was something going on in there. It was almost like they knew I'd been in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, well, I think they were trying to. What my thought is it's one of those frequency where they're trying to push them out, push those Bigfoot out of that area.
Yeah,
and could be what it was.
And here's another thing: the area where saw this activity, there's a major power line that runs through there. You know what I'm talking about? Like it cuts to, you know how they talk about they travel the power lines. And I got to looking on a map, and Google Earth, and I followed that thing, and that power line goes all the way across over to where Squatch Man has his activity. So we kind of share the same you know, trailway there.
Yeah.
So, and I think that this is what I think. I think they're in that area specifically because there's pawpaws in there, because a lot of these encounters and all this evidence that I've gotten has happened in September when the pawpaws are on. And
okay.
I think they're eating the pawpaws, and my house has the pawpaws here too. So, but I'm sorry I talked your ear off. But
no, man. Hey,
If you ever want to do another show, I'll just let you know. My grandfather had an encounter with an extraterrestrial and got to go on board a craft, and he was fully awake when it happened, and it'll blow your mind. So if you ever need another show or whatever, I'll let you in on that sometime.
Yeah, and for everyone who's come in and everyone who will watch this later on, where can they find you?
Hunters of the Paranormal. It's on YouTube, but they changed the algorithms. And if you type in Hunters of the Paranormal, the only thing that comes up is like Ghost Hunter International and Hunters, like stuff like that, because the way they changed the algorithm. So if you really want to find it, I would suggest going to DuckDuckGo and doing a search for Hunters of the Paranormal, and then type in episode 30 or just whatever episode or whatever, and you'll see. If you do episode 30, I think it's with Lance Hightower from what is it? Monster 911.
Yeah.
He was on our show. So
he's got a lot of good stuff.
Yes, he does. And I've tried to find some more stuff because I like watching his stuff and what he has, and he ain't put nothing on for a while. And you know what I hope happened? I hope somebody picked him up and they're doing documentaries, and he's going to come back with something that'll blow our mind.
Yeah, he was over at. Someone was telling me this here. That they go to these different conferences. I know he's at Hanobia this next. I think this weekend actually.
Oh wow!
And so or Honubi, and so, but yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff. He had one encounter. I think what kind of got him in a little bit of trouble, and I don't really know if it's trouble, but or they kind of, did how they do the shadow banning, but he had someone in there that was a part of
SRA. And then we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
we're just going to leave it at that, so you don't have to say it. But you know what? That's after it shut down. But you know what? That's some powerful stuff.
It was pretty creepy too, man. And it had some Bigfoot and Dogman stuff in there too. But man, yeah. Well, I'll definitely be reaching out to you. I'm trying to. I'm thinking about because I'm trying to figure out the rest of the end of the month. But I may have you on. I'm honestly may have you on, maybe around in November when it's colder. But I appreciate you coming on, and like I said, I know that you're on TikTok too as well. That's how we connected is through TikTok. Hunters of the Paranormal. If you go to my page, Warcry Pod, I have a picture with his @ on it. So you just click on the picture, hit his @ go follow, like, subscribe, do what you guys do. And I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, I appreciate everything, and thanks for letting me come on and talk to your War Cry podcast family. And thanks, everybody. And you have a good night, everybody.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You're welcome, buddy. Bye-bye.
There you go, guys. The rest of the month, like I said, I got After Walker Paranormal coming up. We have Patrick Meekin. We have another iteration of an episode with Rod from Lodge Tales. I got to get with him. I'm going to be reaching out to some more people. I want to get a few more people on the docket for the month of October because it is spooky season. But I appreciate Hunters of the Paranormal for coming on, and man, I got goosebumps a few times him telling those stories. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. You can find me on TikTok, Warcry Pod, Facebook, Yahola Tiger. Message me before you add me, and then message me and let me know where you heard me from. I had a few people hit me up this week. I was on Cryptids of the Corn podcast. Appreciate those guys for allowing me to come on and share my spooky stories. But message me, let me know where you heard me, and then we'll do some talking. I got to meet a few people this in messages, and I appreciate them sending the messages and letting me know what they thought about some of my stories. And then on YouTube, and then we have Apple, Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts, Warcry Podcast. And once again, I want to thank Hunters of the Paranormal for coming on and sharing some keen stories. And stay spooky, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.